The wind howled through the broken windows of the old farmhouse, carrying whispers of secrets buried in time. When Daniel Harper returned after weeks away, the lights were on, the curtains moved, and laughter echoed inside a house that was supposed to be empty. If you believe that karma always finds its way back home, subscribe, because this story will make you question what truly belongs to you. Next, it started with silence, the kind that only the countryside knows. After months of living in a noisy town, Daniel Harper wanted peace. He wanted something he could build, touch, and call his own again. The farmhouse had stood for decades, abandoned, with vines climbing its walls like fingers holding onto memory. To anyone else, it was a ruin. But to Daniel, it was a promise. He had bought it cheap, a forgotten property on the edge of rural Pennsylvania. The roof sagged, the porch tilted, and weeds had claimed the land. But to a man who had lost everything, imperfection didn't scare him. He wasn't buying a house, he was rebuilding hope. The first day he walked inside, the dust hung in the air like ghosts of the past. He imagined laughter in the hallways, the smell of fresh bread in the kitchen, and his daughter, Emma, running barefoot through the rooms. It was a dream, fragile yet alive. For weeks, Daniel worked with his hands. He tore out old boards, repaired the roof, and replaced shattered windows. Each nail he hammered was a heartbeat of determination. He wasn't just fixing wood, he was fixing himself. The evenings were long, the nights lonely, but the sunrise always brought purpose. Then came the call. His employer needed him back in town for a short project, just 2 or 3 weeks. Daniel hesitated but couldn't refuse. Money was tight, and every dollar mattered if he wanted to make the farmhouse livable before winter. So he locked the doors, checked the windows, and drove away with a quiet sense of pride. The house stood behind him, empty but alive, like a sleeping creature waiting for his return. The days in town were a blur of work and exhaustion. He called Emma every night, promising they'd move in soon. She always asked about their farmhouse, as if it were already a person in their family. Then came the night that changed everything. When Daniel finally returned, the sun had set behind the hills. The gravel crunched under his tires as he pulled up the dirt driveway, headlights sweeping across the familiar porch. But something felt off. The curtains, once tattered and lifeless, now hung neatly. The front door, which had creaked when closed, was slightly ajar. His stomach tightened. He turned off the engine and listened. The night was quiet, too quiet. Then, faintly, he heard it. Laughter. For a moment, he froze. The sound came from inside his house. A woman's laugh, soft, unbothered, alive. Then another voice joined in. Daniel's heart pounded in disbelief. He stepped out quietly, gravel crunching beneath his boot. The cold air stung his lungs as he moved toward the porch. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from confusion. He had locked every door. No one should be inside. The closer he got, the clearer the sounds became: footsteps, a kettle whistling, and low conversation. Someone was living there. He reached for the doorknob. It was warm. Slowly, he pushed it open. Inside, light flickered across the old wooden walls. A fire burned in the hearth, a fire he hadn't made. There were clothes hanging on a chair, dishes drying on the counter, and blankets on the sofa. The smell of something cooking filled the air. Soup, maybe. Daniel stood in the doorway, his mind spinning. 2 women sat at the kitchen table, laughing over tea. They looked comfortable, as if they'd lived there forever. One of them turned, her expression shifting from calm to shock in an instant. The younger woman gasped. The older one stood, her face unreadable, calm but cautious. Daniel's throat went dry. The house, his house, wasn't abandoned anymore. He wanted to speak, to demand an answer, but words didn't come. The women stared at him in silence, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The fire crackled. The wind rattled a loose shutter. Then the older woman said something quietly, something that would stay with him for years. "You shouldn't have come back." Daniel felt his skin crawl. The tone wasn't angry, it was warning. He stepped back slowly, eyes darting around. The furniture, the photos on the mantel, none of it was his. Someone had moved in. Someone had made his dream their home. His mind raced with questions. Who were they? How did they get in? And why did they sound like they belonged there? He reached for his phone to call the sheriff, but there was no signal. Just the dark countryside pressing in from all sides. The older woman's gaze followed him like a shadow. "You can leave now," she said, still calm. "It's better that way." Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. He wasn't a man who scared easily, but there was something unnatural about their composure, like they knew something he didn't. He backed out of the doorway, the old floorboards creaking beneath his boot. Outside, the air was colder, sharper. He could still hear them talking as he reached his truck, not in fear, not whispering, but casually, like homeowners discussing dinner. He started the engine and drove down the road, his headlights slicing through the darkness. But in the rearview mirror, the farmhouse glowed with warm light, like a living thing reclaiming its place. He should have felt anger. But instead, he felt dread. Something about the way that woman had said, "You shouldn't have come back," echoed in his mind long after he disappeared down the empty road. What did she mean? And who, or what, was living in his house? Daniel didn't sleep that night. He parked his truck a few miles down the road in a small gas station lot, eyes fixed on the farmhouse glowing faintly on the horizon. The image of those two women wouldn't leave his mind, their calmness, their quiet possession of something that was his. By morning, the fear had burned away, replaced by anger. This was his property, legally bought, paid for, and recorded. He wasn't going to let strangers steal it. He returned after sunrise, the frost still clinging to the grass, and parked by the gate. The house stood still and silent again, the fire inside long dead. The front door was closed this time, curtains drawn. It looked innocent, too innocent. He knocked once, twice. No answer. He circled the house, every step crunching over dead leaves. He saw footprints in the mud, small, narrow, two sets, both leading toward the barn. The old barn was a ghost of wood and rusted hinges, its doors hanging crooked. He hesitated before stepping inside. It was empty, mostly. Dust and hay filled the air. But near the back wall there was a mattress on the floor, a pile of blankets, and 2 coffee mugs. He picked one up, still faintly warm. They were still here. Daniel's hands clenched. He stormed back to the truck, grabbed his phone, and called the county sheriff's office. The dispatcher promised to send someone. "Squatters," she said. "It happens out there more than you'd think." He waited by the porch, pacing, the cold wind biting at his face. When the sheriff arrived, an older man named Miller, Daniel explained everything. Miller listened quietly, nodding, eyes fixed on the house. "All right," he said finally. "Let's see who's home." They knocked again, louder this time. A long pause followed. Then footsteps. The door opened, and the same older woman stood there, her gray hair tied neatly, eyes calm but distant. Behind her, the younger woman peeked out, nervous. "This property belongs to Mr. Harper," the sheriff said firmly. "You ladies have to leave." The older woman smiled softly. "You're mistaken, Sheriff. This land has been ours for generations." Daniel's stomach dropped. "That's impossible," he snapped. "I bought it from the county auction myself." She looked at him, not angry, just sad. "Maybe on paper. But some places don't change hands the way you think." The sheriff frowned. "Ma'am, unless you've got proof, you'll need to pack up and go." For a moment, the woman said nothing. Then she stepped aside. "Come in, both of you." The air inside was thick, not just from dust or old wood, but something heavier. The walls were lined with faded photos, none of which had been there before. Daniel stopped at one, an old black-and-white portrait of a family standing in front of his farmhouse. A man, a woman, and 2 daughters. The older woman pointed to it. "My grandmother," she said. "We were born here. We died here." Her words sent a chill through him. The sheriff shifted uneasily. "All right," he said. "Let's not play games. He reached for his radio, but it crackled with static. No signal. The older woman's eyes never left Daniel. "You came looking for peace," she said quietly. "But you brought something else with you, something this house remembers." Daniel felt his heart pound. "What are you talking about?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "When this house was left empty, it slept. It stayed quiet. But you woke it up." The younger woman began to cry softly behind her. The sheriff, trying to stay composed, gestured toward the door. "Ma'am, we're leaving now." But before he could finish, the floorboards groaned, long, slow creaks beneath their feet. The air grew colder. A faint smell, like damp earth and smoke, filled the room. Then came the sound. A low humming, almost musical, rising from beneath the floor. The younger woman screamed, clutching her ears. The older woman's expression hardened. "It's too late," she whispered. The sheriff pulled open the door. "We're getting out." But Daniel didn't move. His eyes were locked on a patch of floor near the fireplace, a square board that had shifted slightly. Something underneath it pulsed faintly, like breathing. He stepped closer, against every instinct telling him to stop. "Don't," the woman warned. He knelt, brushing away dust. The board moved easily, too easily, as if it had been lifted before. Beneath it was darkness, a crawl space. He shined his phone's flashlight down. The beam caught something metallic, a small tin box. He reached in and pulled it out, the wood scraping his arm. The moment he touched it, the humming stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. The sheriff cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "We'll let the county handle this," he muttered, backing toward the door. "Ma'am, you've got until sundown to clear out." The women said nothing. As they left, Daniel felt the weight of the box in his hand. It was old, rusted shut, the metal cool and damp. He didn't open it. Not yet. The sheriff gave him a long look before driving off. "Whatever's in there," he said, "might explain a lot. But I'd be careful if I were you." By evening, Daniel sat alone in his truck, the box resting on the seat beside him. The house loomed in the fading light, its windows glowing faintly again. The women hadn't left. He could see their silhouettes moving inside. Curiosity gnawed at him until he couldn't resist. He pried the lid open. Inside were photographs, old, cracked, edges burnt. The same family from the mantel. And beneath them, a folded newspaper clipping from 1943. "Fire destroys farmhouse. 2 dead, 1 missing." His breath caught. He unfolded the last piece, a small, faded note written in hurried handwriting. "We will return when it's safe." Daniel froze. The air grew colder, the wind louder. From the farmhouse came a flicker of light, not fire, not electric, something else. And then, from somewhere deep inside the house, a voice called out softly through the open window. "Daniel, why did you wake us?" Daniel sat in the dim light of his truck, the tin box open on his lap. The air outside was still, heavy with mist that rolled over the fields like breath. The note trembled in his hand. "We will return when it's safe." Those words crawled into his chest and refused to leave. He looked toward the farmhouse. Through the cracked windshield, he saw movement inside, shadows pacing, faint light flickering, like candles swaying in unseen wind. The women were still there. But something about their shapes didn't feel right anymore. He wanted to call the sheriff again, but his phone battery had died. Maybe it was for the best. He needed answers, not protection. As dawn broke, Daniel stepped out of the truck. The grass was slick with dew, soaking through his boots. The house seemed quieter now, almost welcoming. A crow perched on the chimney, cawing once before flying off into the gray morning. Inside, the air was colder than it should have been. The smell of smoke lingered, faint, old, almost like memory itself. The kitchen looked untouched. The fire had gone out, but there were fresh footprints on the dusty floor, leading toward the back hallway. He followed them slowly, every creak of the floorboard echoing in his chest. At the end of the hall was a door he hadn't noticed before. Small, narrow, half hidden behind a dresser. He moved it aside and found the door slightly open. Beyond it was a staircase descending into darkness. A cold draft rose from below. For a long moment Daniel just stood there, his breath clouding in the air. Then, gripping his flashlight, he stepped down. The steps groaned under his weight, each one colder than the last. The basement smelled of damp earth and old wood. His light caught on something: furniture covered in sheets, shelves of canned food decades expired, a cracked mirror leaning against the wall. And then, he saw them. Photographs, hundreds of them, hanging on strings across the ceiling. All of the same house, the same rooms, the same family. But one detail made his stomach twist. In every single photo, standing in the background, was the same man, tall, solemn, staring directly at the camera. And in the last few photos, that man was Daniel. His flashlight flickered. His heart pounded in his ears. He stumbled backward, knocking over a box. It crashed open, filled with burnt relics, a locket, a child's toy, a melted candle stub. And among them, something metallic glinted. A key. Old and rusted, but familiar. It looked like the spare key he'd hidden under the porch weeks ago. The one he could have sworn he'd lost. A whisper brushed past his ear. "You came back." Daniel spun around, flashlight shaking. No one. Only shadows swaying like breath against the walls. He backed toward the stairs, tripping on a step, his flashlight clattering onto the floor and rolling away. Darkness swallowed him. He scrambled upward, panic surging. When he reached the top, he slammed the door behind him, gasping. His chest burned with cold air. And then, he saw her. The older woman, standing in the hallway, calm as ever. "You shouldn't go down there," she said softly. "The house doesn't like it." Daniel's hands trembled. "What do you mean the house doesn't like it?" She looked toward the basement door, her eyes glassy with something between sorrow and warning. "It remembers who hurts it." He stepped closer, his voice shaking. "Who are you?" For the first time, she smiled faintly. "We told you. We were born here. And we never left." The younger woman appeared behind her, eyes red as if she'd been crying. "Please," she whispered, "don't make it angry again." Daniel's voice rose, frustration breaking through his fear. "This is my property. I bought this land, this house." The older woman's voice cut through him like ice. "No one can own what's already buried." The air grew heavier, pressing against him like unseen weight. From somewhere deep within the house, that low hum began again, the same sound he'd heard before, vibrating through the floorboards. The walls creaked. Dust rained from the ceiling. The lights flickered even though no power ran to the house. Daniel backed away, heart racing, but something in him refused to run. He had faced worse: death, loneliness, grief. He wouldn't let fear take what he'd built. "Tell me what's going on," he demanded. The older woman sighed, stepping closer until her face was inches from his. Her eyes were gray, almost colorless. "This house died in fire. But it didn't rest. It waited for someone to come back, someone who could rebuild it. Someone like you." Daniel frowned, confusion twisting his thoughts. "You mean?" She nodded slowly. "When you repaired the roof, when you opened the walls, when you lit your first fire, you invited us back. You woke it." The hum deepened, shaking the floor. The younger woman covered her ears and sobbed. Daniel turned to run, but the front door wouldn't open. He pulled harder, nothing. The windows were sealed tight, as if the very wood refused to let him go. "Stop fighting it," the older woman whispered. "It just wants to remember." "What does that even mean?" he shouted, panic clawing through him. Her voice softened again. "It means you're part of it now." The hum stopped. Silence swallowed the room. Then, slowly, the door creaked open on its own. Cold air rushed in from outside. The women were gone. Daniel stumbled out onto the porch, gasping. The world outside looked the same, but quieter, muted. The trees stood still, the sky pale. He turned back to look at the house, expecting to see them watching him from the window. But there was no one. Only the empty, hollow stare of broken glass and rotting wood. He could hear his own pulse in his ears. It was over, he told himself. Just squatters. Just tricks of the light and too many sleepless nights. He walked back to his truck, forcing himself to breathe. But as he reached for the door handle, he froze. Inside, on the passenger seat, lay the tin box. He hadn't brought it with him. And next to it, pressed neatly against the seat, was a photograph he had never seen before. It was him, standing in front of the farmhouse, smiling. Behind him, through the window, two women watched. The morning after the photograph appeared, Daniel tried to convince himself it was all a bad dream. The farmhouse was just wood and nails, he told himself, not some living thing, not haunted by whispers of the past. But no matter how he rationalized it, that photo of him, smiling with the two women behind him, burned in his mind like a brand. He packed his bags and told himself he was leaving for good. Yet something, guilt, curiosity, or stubbornness, kept him tethered to that place. He couldn't drive away. The house had become a knot he couldn't untangle. He drove into town instead, to the county records office. The clerk, a gray-haired woman with thick glasses, recognized the address immediately. "That old Harper place," she said. "Harper?" Daniel asked. "That's my name too." She gave him a puzzled look and pulled a dusty folder from the cabinet. "Strange coincidence," she muttered. Inside were yellowed documents, property transfers, death notices, insurance claims. The more Daniel read, the colder his hands became. The original owners, the Harper family, had lived there until 1943, the same year of the newspaper clipping he'd found. The fire had claimed the mother and elder daughter. The father and youngest daughter were never found. The property changed hands several times but was abandoned after a series of accidents. "Some folks say it's cursed," the clerk said lightly, stamping a form. "No one ever stayed long." Daniel forced a shaky laugh. "Guess I'm next in line." He took copies of everything and left, his chest tight with confusion. Could he really be connected to them? A descendant, maybe? Or was this just some twisted coincidence the house wanted him to believe? Back at the farmhouse, the air felt heavier, charged with something unseen. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. The photos on the wall were gone. The rooms looked emptier than before, as though the house had exhaled everything human out of it. Then he heard it, a faint creak upstairs. "Hello," he called out. His voice echoed back hollow. He climbed the staircase, the wood moaning under his boots. The hallway was lined with faded wallpaper, peeling like old skin. At the end, the door to what used to be Emma's future room stood slightly open. He pushed it. The hinges screamed softly. Inside, dust danced in the light of the window. But on the floor, someone had drawn something, a circle, symbols etched into the wood with ash. In the center, a photograph burned slowly, curling at the edges. It was the same photo, him and the two women. Daniel stomped it out, heart pounding. "What do you want from me?" he shouted, his voice cracking in the emptiness. The wind outside picked up, rattling the window panes. Somewhere in the house, a door slammed shut. Then came the whisper. It was faint, almost like breath brushing his neck. "Remember." Daniel spun around, but no one was there. The walls seemed to pulse with the word, the air thickening with the echo of it. He stumbled backward, tripping over the floorboard near the bed. It lifted slightly, the same one that had given way by the fireplace. Something glinted underneath. Kneeling, he pried it open. Beneath the plank lay a bundle wrapped in fabric, old and stained. He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a charred locket, a small silver hairpin, and a photograph burned around the edges. The same woman he'd seen before, the older one. On the back, written in delicate script, "Eleanor Harper, 1942. His throat went dry. Eleanor. The woman in his house had introduced herself as Ellen. The truth hit him like a wave. She wasn't just some intruder. She was her. The room grew colder, the light dimming. His breath came out in white clouds. From the corner of the room came a soft sound, the creak of footsteps. Daniel turned slowly. Eleanor stood there, her expression neither angry nor kind. Just sorrowful. "You've seen too much," she said quietly. "The house remembers now, and it won't stop." Daniel's voice broke. "Why me? What does this place want?" She looked around the room, her hand brushing the wall. "It doesn't want. It mourns. You're the blood it was waiting for." He shook his head. "That's not possible." "I'm not." "You are," she interrupted. "You carry our name. The house called you back." The words struck him with dizzying force. The records, the name, the strange pull he'd felt the first time he saw the place. It all connected. Eleanor stepped closer, her voice trembling. "It needed you to finish what we couldn't. To lay it to rest." The house groaned, the ceiling cracking faintly. A deep rumble rose from the ground, as though the earth beneath was shifting. Daniel stumbled, grabbing the wall for balance. "How?" he shouted over the growing noise. "How do I stop it?" Eleanor's face softened, her eyes glistening. "By remembering. By freeing it from us." The younger woman appeared in the doorway then, silent, pale, her eyes hollow. "You can't stop it," she whispered. "It's already begun." Daniel looked around, heart hammering. The wallpaper was peeling away faster, revealing burned wood beneath. Smoke curled up through cracks in the floor. The air filled with the faint, choking scent of fire. He backed away toward the hallway, coughing. "What's happening?" Eleanor's voice came faintly through the smoke. "It's reliving its last night. It wants you to see." Flames flickered in the corners, spreading along the old beams. The same fire that had destroyed the house once before was returning, not real, but memory made alive. Daniel ran, stumbling down the stairs as the hum of voices filled the air, crying, shouting, pleading, echoes of the family that had died there. He reached the front door, grabbed the handle, and stopped. Through the window, the reflection staring back wasn't his own. It was the man from the old photographs, the father of the family, wearing Daniel's face. A sudden realization hit him with full force. The house hadn't mistaken him for family. It was his family. He was their blood, their unfinished story. The floor trembled. Flames licked up the doorway. Daniel pushed outside, gasping as the cold air hit his lungs. But when he turned back, the house wasn't burning. It stood perfectly still, silent, untouched, as if nothing had happened. And at the window, Eleanor watched him one last time, before slowly fading into the shadows. The house had remembered. But it wasn't done yet. The morning came with silence. No birds, no wind, just the heavy stillness that settled after truth finally found its voice. Daniel sat on the porch, staring at the old farmhouse. The same house he'd once dreamed would give him and Emma a fresh start now felt like an open wound, whispering his name in every creak of the floorboards. He'd spent the night in his truck, too shaken to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Eleanor's face. The sorrow in her expression wasn't anger, it was grief. The kind that lasts through lifetimes. In the pale light, the farmhouse didn't look haunted. It looked tired, like it had waited too long to be forgiven. Daniel rose, his boots crunching the frost-bitten ground, and walked toward the door. The lock was broken again, swinging open slightly, inviting him back inside. "All right," he muttered, voice rough. "You want me to remember? Then show me everything." The moment he stepped in, the air shifted. The house came alive. Faint whispers filled the hallway, laughter, footsteps, the echo of a life once lived. The scent of bread baking and fresh pine filled the air. For a moment it was 1942 again. Daniel walked through the kitchen. Sunlight shimmered through the windows, showing a family gathered for breakfast. The father, his mirror image, reading the newspaper. Eleanor pouring coffee. The little girl giggling over spilled jam. Emma's age, Daniel realized. His heart clenched. Then, just as quickly, the illusion rippled away. The laughter twisted into screams. Smoke filled the air again. The house shook, trembling in agony as if the fire were happening all over. Daniel stumbled backward. "Stop," he shouted. I don't need to see this. But the walls had their own will. A beam of light flashed across the hallway, leading him toward the basement door. He hesitated. That door had always been stuck before. Now it stood open, stairs yawning downward into blackness. With trembling hands, he flicked on his flashlight and descended. Each step creaked under his weight, dust falling from the beams above. The deeper he went, the colder it grew, until his breath fogged in front of him. At the bottom was a stone floor, and in the center, an old iron trunk. Its surface was scorched, its hinges rusted. Daniel knelt, brushing off the dirt. The lock had already been broken, as though someone, or something, wanted him to open it. Inside lay stacks of letters, photographs, and a small book bound in cracked leather. He picked it up. On the first page, in faded handwriting, were the words, "To my son, should the fire take us before morning." Daniel's blood ran cold. He turned the page, reading by the trembling light. The words belonged to Eleanor's husband, Thomas Harper. The journal detailed the night of the fire. It wasn't an accident. It was revenge. The Harpers had uncovered something, a secret about the land, about a group of townsmen who had stolen and burned farms to claim insurance money during the war. When Thomas tried to expose them, they came for his family instead. Eleanor had hidden her daughters in the basement, but the smoke reached them first. Thomas never escaped. The last line of the journal was written in trembling script. "If our blood returns to this soil, the house will remember, and justice will awaken." Daniel froze. The words weren't metaphor. They were prophecy. He heard movement behind him, soft, deliberate. He turned sharply, the flashlight trembling in his grip. At the base of the stairs stood Eleanor. Her face was gentler this time, calm. The younger woman, her daughter, beside her. "You found it," Eleanor said softly. Daniel swallowed. "It's true, isn't it? I'm your blood." She nodded once. "You are Thomas's great-grandson. The last Harper to come home." He sank to his knees, the weight of it hitting him like a storm. "Why me? Why now?" Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with sadness and pride. "Because the men who burned us, their bloodline still lives. They built this town on our ashes, and you were the only one who could end it." Daniel shook his head. "You want revenge?" "No," she whispered. "Peace. But peace only comes when truth is spoken." From the trunk, a faint glow began to pulse. The letters shimmered faintly, as though remembering. "Take it," Eleanor said. "The town needs to know what they buried. The names. The proof. End it, Daniel." He picked up the journal, clutching it to his chest. When he looked up again, the two women were fading. "Wait," he said. "What happens to you?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "We rest." And then they were gone. The air stilled. The house sighed a deep, final exhale. The creaks and whispers stopped. The walls no longer bled memory. For the first time, the farmhouse was truly quiet. Days later, Daniel sat at the sheriff's office, the journal spread open on the desk. The sheriff, an old man who'd grown up hearing ghost stories about the Harper house, turned pale as he read. Within days, the story spread across the town. Corruption, murder, fire, and cover-ups dating back generations. Graves were re-examined, property deeds rewritten. The truth finally saw daylight. And as if the land itself knew, the farmhouse seemed to bloom again. The grass grew greener. The wind no longer howled at night. Daniel returned one last time, standing before the old home that had carried so much sorrow. "You're free now," he said quietly. Emma tugged at his sleeve. "Can we keep it, Dad? It's pretty." He smiled. "Maybe someday. But not now." As they walked away, sunlight streamed through the cracked windows, soft and golden. Inside, the faint echo of laughter drifted through the halls. The house remembered, yes. But this time, it remembered peace. The farmhouse stood silent in the distance, its outline framed against the orange burn of a dying sun. Weeks had passed since the truth came out, and Daniel had finally begun to feel something he hadn't in years. Peace. But peace is a fragile thing in places that remember too much. He and Emma had moved into a rental nearby, while the farmhouse remained empty, now legally his after the investigation. The sheriff had confirmed everything. The land deeds, the hidden names, even the files that linked the arson to the founding families of the town. The scandal rocked the county. Old reputations burned. The Harper name, once whispered in ghost stories, was finally spoken with respect. And yet, Daniel couldn't stay away. Every evening, he drove back to that gravel road, parked his truck by the fence, and just watched the old house. The roof glinted faintly in the sunset, the windows reflecting like eyes, old, wise, and maybe still awake. One evening, Emma joined him. "It doesn't look scary anymore," she said softly. "No," Daniel replied. "It doesn't." But when he glanced toward the top window, Eleanor's window, he thought he saw a flicker of movement. A shadow. A shape. Then nothing. He told himself it was just the wind. A month later, Daniel received a letter. No return address. Just his name, written in looping handwriting that felt familiar. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a short note on yellowed paper. "You've done well. But not all fires stay buried. Look to the roots." Below the line was a pressed wildflower, dried lavender, the same flower that had once grown behind the farmhouse porch. Daniel's breath caught. He turned the note over, but the rest was blank. That night, sleep refused to come. At 2:17 a.m., he grabbed his coat and keys. The drive was long and silent, the moon hanging low over the empty road. When he reached the farmhouse, the wind had picked up, carrying the faint scent of smoke, though there was no fire in sight. He stepped out, flashlight in hand. The house loomed before him, calm but expectant. He entered slowly. The air felt different this time, not heavy but restless, as if the house had one last thing to say. The floorboards creaked under his boot. His flashlight beam swept over the walls, bare, dust-covered, stripped of memories. The kitchen smelled faintly of lavender and charred wood. He whispered into the silence, "I kept my promise. You can rest now." But the silence didn't answer. Then came the sound, faint, rhythmic from beneath the floor. A heartbeat. No, a pulse. Like something alive beneath the wood. Daniel froze. The sound grew louder, resonating through the walls, the beams, the very air. His flashlight flickered once, then went out. For a moment, he stood in complete darkness. Then light bloomed. Soft, golden light, spilling from the cracks in the floor, the walls, the ceiling. It wasn't fire this time. It was memory, pure and luminous. Figures began to form around him. Eleanor, her daughter, and others. Men, women, children, all glowing faintly, translucent but radiant. The lost families of Harper Hill. Eleanor smiled at him. "You freed us," she said. "But not all pain ends with truth." Daniel swallowed. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, her eyes shimmering. "There is another fire, still burning in the hearts of those who did this. You cannot stop that with paper or justice. Only with remembrance." He nodded slowly. "Then I'll remember. I'll tell everyone who'll listen." Eleanor reached out, her hand hovering just above his cheek. "Then the house will stand with you." The light brightened, until everything dissolved in white. When Daniel woke, he was lying on the floor of the farmhouse. The air was cold and still. His flashlight flickered back to life beside him. He sat up slowly, head spinning. The place looked new. The soot-stained walls were clean. The floor polished. The windows intact. He stepped outside into the dawn and froze. The entire property had changed. The fields were green again, wildflowers swaying in the morning breeze. Birds filled the trees. And the farmhouse, his farmhouse, stood gleaming in the light, restored, whole, alive. Emma came running up the path behind him, laughing, her hair catching the sun. "Dad! It's beautiful!" He looked down at her and smiled. "Yeah, it is." She pointed toward the porch. "Who's that?" Daniel turned, and his heart stopped. A woman stood by the door, her form clear, her smile familiar. Eleanor. She wasn't a ghost now, not exactly. She looked alive, flesh and bone, dressed in soft linen, sunlight glowing around her. But when Daniel blinked, she was gone. All that remained was the lavender, growing thick along the porch rail. Months later, Daniel reopened the farmhouse, this time as a community restoration project, a symbol of truth and rebirth. Locals came from nearby towns to help paint, plant, rebuild. The story of the Harper tragedy spread online, and soon, donations and volunteers arrived. Every person who worked there said the same thing, that they felt something in the air. A calmness, a warmth. At night, when Daniel locked up, he sometimes heard faint laughter echoing from the halls. The sound of a little girl, perhaps. He'd smile, whisper, "Good night," and walk away. On the first anniversary of the discovery, Daniel placed a lantern on the porch and lit it. The light flickered softly, golden against the night. From the distance, through the rustle of trees, came a whisper, one he could barely make out, yet felt deep in his chest. Home. And with that, the wind carried the sound away, into the valley, into forever. Daniel turned, took Emma's hand, and walked toward the truck. Behind him, the farmhouse glowed faintly under the stars, as if watching over them both. The past had been buried, yes. But memory never dies. It just learns how to live again,